You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special end-of-the-year edition of the Big Cast. My name's John Best, and I'm the CEO of Best Innovation Group. And with me is my esteemed panel that often joins me at this time of year for the Thanksgiving episode and soon a predictions episode. But we're going to talk about the biggest stories. I have Glenn Sarvati with me. Hey, Glenn.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I have Ann Legg from Thrive.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. And then I have Mr. John Jankulius from Nimbus. Hey, John.
Hey, John. Hey, everybody. Glad to join you.
Yeah, so I'm always excited about these episodes because I believe that this recap is really important, but it's never been more important than this year. And I'll tell you why. Because at first I was thinking, because I'm getting older, and as you get older, things just fly by. Like you look up and it's 5 years later. But really and truly, when you look at the progress and all the things that have happened in the last year, it's just enormous. There's been a lot of rampant change. And I think we tend to sort of forget about some of these bigger things that happen in light of all the other things that are going on, particularly in an election year. So I'm curious for everybody to talk about their stories. I know I got a few queued up, but let's start with Glenn. So Glenn, give us the premise of this episode and how we're going to go about this.
Well, let's just do our usual roundtable approach, and we'll each throw out, I'm sure we have not compared notes in advance, by the way.
So we all could just have the same 5 things.
With one little exception. And even if we only have 5 things, that's probably about all we have time to talk about. So let's find out.
Yep.
I'm going to start with one that I think kind of encapsulates the year in a couple of different directions. And I had to go back and remind myself that it actually happened this year because it feels so long ago. And that was the announced merger of Capital One and Discover, which was announced back in February and still hasn't officially been closed, which is part of my point, is that it has to do with the M&A climate. And now we are kind of moving in, and there seemed to be some momentum toward the end of the year that people thought that maybe it was starting to kind of come through, although there's still been objections against it. But with the new administration coming in after the election, it seems that we are looking at a more, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, a more friendly climate for financing deals, IPOs, acquisitions, things like that. So it does now look like the Capital One will wind up taking ownership of Discover. The other thing that I think is really interesting about that one is, with all the talk about credit cards, I think the general population thinks about this one as 2 credit card companies coming together. What I focus on is the fact that there is a new debit network coming into the mix as well, and a new set of rails that Capital One will wind up owning. And then that ties into yet another story that I keep thinking about, is the Credit Card Competition Act, looking at ways to try to force, some type of further competition within the credit rails with Visa and MasterCard. And particularly on the debit side, one of the arguments has always been we need another strong player. Well, if Capital One takes all of its volume and moves it on to Discover's debit network, suddenly you've got a strong third player. So I see this one actually playing in a lot of different ways.
Do you think, go ahead.
So I was going to ask if anybody else had other angles on this one, but to me, that's probably the single most fascinating thing that's happened this year.
Do you think it would have turned out differently had Biden won the election?
That's a really good question. I was starting, and it's strange because I was getting wind of kind of this kind of undercurrent that maybe it was going to go through, even before the election date. And, I still thought it was a 50-50 shot until literally the day before the election. And I got the impression that Discover and both parties were getting more confident that it was going to pass as well. Why that's the case, I'm not really sure. But I think it's a foregone conclusion, whereas before I think we might have still had, some more road ahead of us.
Well, just to go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to pin that, although it's not the same, it is interesting about Kroger and
Albertsons, yeah.
And
that's the last grocery store, right? There's none left after that. Kroger owns them all.
Well, they're still together. They're still separate, according to the. But that was an interesting one, because I actually thought about what you were just talking about, and I thought, oh, is this an interesting change? I mean, they're different clearly, because in the case of Albertsons and Kroger, it was, oh my gosh, there will be no more competition whatsoever. It'll just be one monolith. However, to your point,
eggs will be $100 an egg.
Right, right. In fact, we should all just start getting chickens right now.
I've been buying chickens since then. Yeah, I have a lot of chickens.
I know, we can't wait to get your fresh eggs. So, so when we think about a merger of, like we said, bringing on new rails, this is going to be an interesting time. This is going to be.
And it is interesting. I mean, they literally just announced that deal fell apart the day that we're recording this. And I was very surprised, kind of to your point, Dan, that it's like, well, maybe if they appeal and they go back, and maybe the case winds up getting reconsidered, maybe it would. But it does seem like, I forget which of the two pulled out, but no, it looks like it is a dead deal, which really kind of surprised me at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to ask the question of John on this subject, from your point of view, as we're used to Nimbus and the QSO, but when Glenn says, hey, they bought a new debit network, there's got to be a group that's just sitting there ready for the day that happens to reroute all this traffic. From your perspective, how does that affect credit unions? Is there less interchange, more interchange, or is it just things are going to be different, come different ways, but settlement's going to look a little different, but really it's just squeezing the balloon, right? The air just goes one place to the other. Or how do you see that?
It's that, John, but when I think about these acquisitions, I'm thinking about, like everybody, and we have other examples we can talk about here, the scale in order for them to continue to compete, to put the technology in place to kind of be a driving force, that if they were to continue on their own path for the investments that are needed, they need to even get bigger, right? They even need more scale.
Right.
And I was really, at this stage of the game, after, they were kind of listing in the wind for the last year, how Discover would ever, it was going to be tough enough as an ongoing entity, and they were running up on the rocks even before this. I don't know how they ever would have survived. Talk about, at that point, you'd even have less competition, even if they did, get set up free as their own entity again.
See, I thought it was going to be an interesting fire sale if that didn't work out. I thought they were going to have to chop it up, sell the debit network on one side. And I was going to say Valera needs to compete for that. If that happened, I don't know why Valera did, they should have thrown, I wish they could have thrown their hat in the ring for Discover to begin with, but it is what it is. So let's move on to the next one. Anne, you're looking wonderful today. What do you got?
I got some numbers. And I know it's not nearly as exciting as what you just said, Glenn, but there's a couple things that I think maybe have just been a little undercurrent. And I think that is the growth of the economy. All right. So we're sitting there and it's now been hovering between 2 and 3, right? So pretty good spot. But what's been driving that has been all this consumer spending, which means we have seen it becoming to see how much more can consumers actually max out on their credit cards. And we're beginning to see some of that show up in DQs. We're also beginning to see impact on buy now, pay later. So I bring that all together and it does make me go, hey, we can keep on spending to keep this economy in the way that it is. Granted, we'll have all new, kind of leaders to drive this next year, but still, when you look back on that was an incredible year to truly say, I think we landed a soft landing. However, maybe that's this pinpoint this year, but what does that mean next year? Although I know that's predictions for next year, but interesting that we did land, or not, I shouldn't say we, but that the economy landed.
Just you and me, you and Glenn Servati, we landed the plane. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, but let me ask a question though. Say more about BNPL and DQs and credit cards. I'm curious as to what, because you're a data person. Tell me what you're seeing.
So this is really fascinating. I have been seeing an incredible amount of buy now, pay later absolutely coming into the credit union space to the point where they don't know. So I'm happy we're discussing it. Hey, you credit unions, check out your buy now, pay laters, because it's really becoming quite a thing.
And so that's being like, when you say coming in, you mean being sort of ACH'd out of a DDA account towards somebody like Klarna or whatever, where they've used this other tool, but the source of the payment comes from the credit union space.
Right. And what's interesting is you're seeing, so let's just say 2 years ago, you looked and said, okay, how are members paying for things? And you see credit card, you're seeing debit card. You are now seeing a viable player later.
Yeah.
What do you think's pushing that? Is it rates? Is it the inability to purchase it? Is it is there something inviting about it? Or
it's ubiquitous. So now I can look and say, oh, that $150 item I want, I only have to pay for 4 payments. The challenge is you're now seeing, and I did actually see this, there was a member who spent literally $7 for that bagel that they consumed 4 weeks ago, but paid it off over 4 payments.
Oh no, and I believe you. I mean, I'm seeing it in what surprised me was I saw just recently I pay the rent for this place because I haven't bought a place down here yet through an app, and up until just recently it was just either ACH or credit card, and now it has a um spread the payments out. Also, my lawyer has that in his interface, which I
Oh,
thought was
it really
interesting.
does.
And
Yeah.
legal services, which is a
John,
place that, I mean, that's a lot of money that you spend there. So I can see why that is. But when you talk about the DQs related to it, is it because this is sort of not on the books with regards to Koreans and how they're discerning the creditworthiness of an individual because of the BNPLs? Is that what you're thinking?
So no, two separate things. So
Okay.
I'm higher presence of the buy now pay laters, which is really interesting because it now means, wow, there is something going on in your member spend, and it is not by just the young members. It is not by just 85s.
It's
You're seeing
anybody that can click that button. Yeah. So it's no longer like
you're seeing
a
coming-
millennial trope, you know?
I was about to ask that because I was thinking, is this a younger demographic phenomenon? But the answer
It's majority, but you're now seeing the creep. Okay. The other thing you're seeing the creep, you're seeing more members using it, right? Okay. Now, separate to that, you're seeing a higher spend and a higher balance keep, on the credit cards. And now you're seeing those DQs tip over because they're like, I just can't make it. I have been living off of credit when it was kind of nice and cheap and I could sort of have it. And now I have finally, after 4 to 5 years of just crazy volume of spending, I've now reached it, which is why I think, to go backwards on what you said, John, when I've hit my limit on my credit card, I'm going to now go to buy now pay later.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
keep the crack coming in.
I read somewhere too that in the online markets, if you do not have the buy now pay later option, that your sales are suffering for online retailers. So there's a huge push that if you provide that marketplace is still very dynamic, and there's a real need to put that in place, which talks
I
about
wonder
demand.
to your
Huge
point,
push
John,
for
how much of
Black
Black Friday was done that way? Will there be a hangover from that? I wonder.
So there was a huge push to get that into Black Friday, and then from the Black Friday sales, the majority were still done online. I mean, there's a chunk that were done, in person, but there was a ton that were done online, which would be curious to see if that's not Black Friday.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what that looks like. So great observation, one that's important for the Koreans. Thanks, Ann. John, what do you got? What are you thinking?
There's so many things to be looking at. Maybe related to this is the amount of people who have a side hustle now. That's gone up to about 44% of people.
Speaking of that, I have to end this a little early because I got to deliver some stuff for Walmart.
Me too. I
got 2 orders and there's a couple substitutions. It's a thing.
44%, did you say, John?
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Stunning. We did some research with Filene, and so look to your members. If you're not offering SMB, look for those kinds of markers, and Ann could probably help us think about how to find that. But
what's SMB for our listeners asking for a friend?
Small business banking. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And
so do you think
I would key, if I just may, I would key on to that as also doing DBAs. Because that's huge.
Yes.
If you're not, you don't have to be in small market to do a DBA.
But John, so if I'm side hustling, so the way I would find that is deposits from especially the same day stuff. That's been interesting to me, how payroll is moving in that direction of work, get paid, kind of old school, hang out at the Home Depot and get picked up, go somewhere, hammer some nails in and get $50 or $20 for the day. But you're saying from the digital side hustle, the app-based side hustles, or are you saying more, hey, someone has a whole second job and a business in that second job, or is it both?
All over the place. A big category of that is makers, people who want to make stuff and sell it on the side, people who are kind of doing an Uber. I mean, the last Uber ride I had to the airport, I asked the person, you might be asked, like, why do you Uber? He goes, oh, this is a side hustle. And I just put it away for my retirement because I don't have a 401k at work anymore. So I figured, rather than watch TV, why don't I just drive 2 days a week, put it away for my retirement? So
well,
a lot of folks have that kind of motivation.
I don't know if you noticed this, but it's become appropriate in any business or anything you do. As a matter of fact, I have mine in right now to wear iPods, or AirPods, no matter what you do. Every drive-through I go through, they got AirPods in. And here's my theory. I have a theory of what's going on. I think they have a new app that's like a soundtrack for your life, like a video game. And so like as more cars show up and it gets busier, the music gets a little heavier. And and then when things are good, it plays happy songs or happy background music. But I don't know if you know, like every stocker I run into, Walmart, every Target employee, even the cashiers, all have AirPods in. Which, by the way, it's interesting. I saw a commercial the other day for an instant translator on a site where they put it in their
I
ear.
bought one, John. I bought one.
You bought one of those? I wanted to see. I was going to buy one too. I'm curious as to how it works and how well it works.
The price was like $35.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy one too.
It's on its way.
Yeah, is it the one that goes the commercial where the guy goes, "Hey, let me speak Spanish," and he puts it in her ear? Yeah, I want one of those.
Yeah.
Well,
I wanted to see how well it works.
The Apple iBuds have actually now been approved for FDA hearing.
Right. Yeah, which I will actually be using those. My hearing is going pretty quickly.
But you know what you were talking about the when you're looking at the side hustle, we also see that in the data in both the Stripe as well. And this is, money coming in from Stripe, from PayPal, and from Venmo. You are absolutely. There's also
those are the areas where the side hustle would present itself in terms of being paid.
Earnin. So Earnin is an app where you can actually get paid a little bit early. So if you have a side hustle and you're like, hey, it's going to take a minute to get this, I can also use Earnin, which is now a whole new way of looking at that loan shark moment. Yes, I called it that, where people were going and doing.
Well, it's a new style of payday loans.
Exactly.
Absolutely, and it's digital payday loans is what it is, dressed up.
I
was looking at that too.
I'd not heard of that. So by definition, if you see inflows from Earnin, it means you're doing a side hustle? There's no.
It can be. You'd have to try and blend some other indicators. But what was
Earnin is a way of getting money ahead of time on your side hustle, right?
So, yeah. But it wouldn't have to be on your side hustle? I mean, it could,
yeah.
No. But it's
on your paycheck.
Correct. It's also a way of saying, hey, if I'm doing that and I've got buy now, pay later, maybe I need to talk to somebody about maybe I need a financial intervention.
Yeah.
Very curious. Hey, John, what's the name of the translator box? What was the product name? Do you know? Do you remember? I saw it on the screen. Yeah, we'll try to. We'll get it.
Rifling through Facebook.
I know people are going to ask, so we might as well chase it down. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you my story for the year. If you, good news. 2024 will always be remembered as the year that we all realize that we're living in the simulation. And since it is a simulation, none of this matters. Now that I know that, it's been great fun for me. Once I realized that, because there's no way any of this is real. It's just, you couldn't write this stuff.
So we can ask for a do-over?
Oh, you can rewind. You could just, you could stop it. No, but in all seriousness, did you guys know that this year, a record number of credit unions either absorbed or they converted community banks to credit unions?
20, all-time record. 20.
All-time record. All-time record. So because one of the big stories I think that snuck up on me this year is mergers and MMA activity in general. It's sort of the new way to grow, right? And so I've been thinking about an app. I have this idea, an app called Merger Tinder. And so it's just like, hey, take a look at us, maybe a picture of, like, Ann just disappeared. Look, you flip through like, not them. Oh, look at this one. And they gotta have at least 5 photos or it's a no-go. But no, this idea.
Gotta have some financials in there too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, they better have at least a good story, and it's nice if they have pets. There's a lot of ways that you can look and see. But in all seriousness, this consolidation, from Co-op and PSU and America's Credit Unions, once NAFQ and CUNA, and just this continued consolidation has definitely been a story. But what snuck up on me was this story about community banks, either converting to credit unions or being absorbed, and not just. It used to be you would just buy a branch of a bank, or these are whole banks that are getting absorbed in, and I participated in a couple of those. So that to me was an interesting story for the year. And not only that, but we've been doing these expedited mergers at Big. So something we helped work through with United Credit Union, which was a fantastic experience. Shout out to Sarah Fenner, and her group. But what the goal, I was talking to one of the credit unions, and they said, "How can I do 12 mergers a year?" That's what they want. And I thought, well, first, you're going to have to hire a lot of therapists. Once you get the therapists, you should invest in BetterHelp or something like that. I'd be happy to participate because you're going to need that. Because when the staff hears 12 a year, they're definitely going to start calling that EAP hotline you pay for.
The staff,
But no,
on,
all
the staff on
seriousness,
both sides of the transaction. Exactly.
but in all seriousness, 6 a year could be a thing. And what does that mean for the industry and where we are right now? Because we're at what, just under 38 or something, 3,800 or something like
falling
that.
under 4. It's someplace right.
It's right under 4,000, I think. And does the expected deregulation, because the hardest part of the merger has been getting it approved, right? So you got to go through, you have to do all the to get it approved through the current process, and also deal with the ramifications of the merger itself in regards to the vote at the credit union and all the things that go with it. But yeah, so I thought that was an interesting story for the year,
John,
especially on the community bank side.
Yeah, John, when I looked at some of those mergers, I read through all 20 of them, the sizes of them. Like some of the smaller ones were only like 80 million in assets, 120 million assets. And I'm wondering about what did you pay for it versus the lift that you're going to have to do with that old tech stack at the old place, and the cost of doing that. Is that baked into the price? Have we thought about that?
Yeah, and we talked about that a bit.
That's hard, man.
Well, and there's a lost leader to it too, because with those community banks and stuff, there's no keeping. Here's the interesting part. So the credit union way of merging is for Pac-Man style, right? One's going to eat the other one, and it becomes in the same system. That's not how banks merge. Banks, they tether boats together like a fleet. When Huntington was absorbed and First Union and all those guys, for a long time, those were just well-connected separate systems with a brand. And that's the way I believe that they were able to make that those numbers work. And they're not doing that here. And when you lose, the big one for me is losing the card interchange when you reissue, because I believe, and we talked a lot about this, Glenn, subscription-based card on file is the sticky. If we've learned nothing from this year, especially from Rocket Money and all of their commercials, subscription-based handling of finances. You talk about the spending, Ann. I wonder how much of that goes into these subscription-based processes. And we just had a call earlier where we were talking about what will happen with regulation with regards to things like repos and stuff. And I see that moving towards autonomous cars driving themselves home. I literally could see that if you don't pay your bill, you go outside to start your car, it might not be there because it just left and went home. And you may have to get on your phone and pay the bill so it'll come back to you. And I mean, I think that's the world we're headed towards. And I think we're headed there much quicker than anybody imagines because of the entire lift of AI as an overall lifter. I don't know, force multiplier. I think John would use that because that's a word that John's good at, something like that. I'm going to say lifter because I'm in the South, but a force multiplier across not just one discipline, but all disciplines. And I think that's the story of the latter half of 2024, and will be the big story of second and third quarter of 2024.
I'm laughing at our Thanksgiving dinner. We were talking about looking into the future, and I was saying pretty soon your life will be subscription. I just want to trade in this life for another one. Seriously.
Yeah, keep paying.
The efficiency of brokers and changing assets and back and forth. That's a huge amount.
Well, I thought you were talking about healthcare. I was thinking, yeah, you're right. Keep paying or you die. But
you want your heart back? Here you go.
Yeah, you don't forget your healthcare loan. Your dude, I did buy now, pay later. I wish I hadn't done that. But,
I'm sure.
yeah, but I mean, that's happening if you got to pay for hospitals. I completely agree. All right, so we want to keep going. We're going to go around some more stories here, so want to keep us on time. Let's go to Glenn. Glenn, what's your next story?
John, you and I have talked about this one a lot, but I think, and this was the one that really was the sneak attack that came in during the year, which was Illinois' Interchange Fee Prohibition Act, which wound up
prohibition. I just like the word prohibition.
Got passed, I think, was it June?
Because that makes me think of speakeasies, and maybe that's where we do our interchange, down in a secret room that you have to get in.
I mean, this has been something that's been on the wish list for the retailers forever, and they managed.
But it wasn't the retailers that did this. They accidentally lit the fuse, and it's not gonna be good for them either.
Well, it depends on which retailers you mean. The big box retailers are going to come out great, but the small guys, I think they're being sold a bill of goods, because I think that they'll come out at best, even probably they're going to lose on it.
I would agree. I don't see any way that they're even personally.
And we'll see what
I've thought
happens
about pretty hard.
going down the road. But once Illinois did it, they rushed to the courthouse steps, the legislator steps at the Capitol in Pennsylvania, and they were trying to do it there, but it was no longer a sneak attack, and it kind of got parried away. We're still waiting to see what happens. It doesn't.
Well, real quick, just for listeners who don't know what that is, why don't you just recap it, and then after that, I'd like to hear from Ann and John if they think that the current administration is either going to hinder that or it will be a boost for it. But let's start with you explaining it, Glenn.
And again, don't forget, this is state level, so the administration.
And by the way, we have a podcast on this, right? Don't we?
We have a couple. We can post a link. We actually spoke at length with Tom Kane out of the Illinois.
But go ahead.
So, but the premise of it, and again, it's state level, so I don't think the national administration,
which is all the more confusing from a technology
it's become
standpoint.
50 different rules. But the Illinois legislature passed a law that said that interchange cannot be charged on any state taxes or gratuities, which is, sounds simple. Good luck trying to get that implemented. It just doesn't make sense. So, in trying to figure out how that actually gets implemented in the first place, then there was the question of, okay, well, does that mean that everyone's looking at every individual transaction? How do you run these transactions? Then they actually added an additional clause in it that said, okay, and you can't share any of this information if you're looking at it. Well, that suddenly is cutting off some of the existing work that's being done collaboratively to fight fraud. So this could actually cause greater fraud to take place as well.
Go ahead. Was there an event that prompted them to want to propose this?
It was purely a budgetary. It was the Illinois state budget that was running a deficit. They were looking for places to cut. Apparently, there has always been something in the books that the retailers, because effectively the retailers are acting as the tax collectors on sales tax for the state. So they got some kind of a break in terms of their taxes because of the fact that they were serving as a tax collector. That was proposed to be sliced in the most recent budget. And the retailers got very upset. And at the 11th hour, the governor said, what can we do to make you feel better? Well, we've got this thing we've wanted to pass for some time. Could you do this? Well, from the state, that looked great because they were going to save on tax dollars because they were no longer going to give the break to the retailers. This was purely a transfer of wealth between the banks and card issuers to the retailers. So this didn't affect the books of the state whatsoever. So they said, sure, we'll do it. And
I think that's
literally in the last 30
not knowing
hours.
what they were, but they had no clue what they were saying.
No, and now I think it's a matter of them trying to figure out how they can not have this be a big mess. And like I say, it doesn't go, and that'll, to me, I'll be one of the big things to be watching for the first half of the year now, because how they're going to manage to get out of this mess and how you actually do implement it if it doesn't get stopped or it gets delayed. It's going to, and if it gets delayed, then the state of Illinois has got another budget hole.
So I promised I'd be our timekeeper. So I'm going to keep us going because I want to hear more of these from everybody else. So skip what I said earlier. Let's go on to Ann. Ann, what's your big story? What's your next one?
The one that, and it just happened today, but it was just so relevant, is that Amazon is now selling cars. Hyundais to be exact.
Yes.
Oh, are they selling Ioniqs? Because I really want an Ioniq.
I'm sure you can get one. It's only new, not used, but it made
I want a new one, so that'll work out. The other ones smell.
This is that moment that happened in 2024 that we'll probably forget because there's a lot of other stuff going on, where we now truly have online retail for autos. I mean, I'm
going to see if I can buy one right now.
Do it. Now, here's the interesting part. When I think about it from the Cranium perspective, I'm like, they're not going to do financing. So how do you get in front of that Mekana to make sure that that happens? Because, easy peasy. And of course, it's not going to be delivered at your house. You got to go pick it up. There's no just-in-time delivery of a new car.
Oh, check it out. It's a whole showroom.
Right.
Wow.
It sounds like a great place for our friend Tony and Origins to jump in.
Exactly.
Yeah. The dealership has just moved from brick and mortar to online. Yeah.
You can buy all the way back to 2023 models.
But this is now where they've actually made it, they've gone
this
from
is really cool, Ann. Thank you for sharing.
So anyways, what a moment right now to know that I can go on Amazon and truly not only can, You know what, John? That's what I'm
But
gonna
you know what? It's not Prime. I can't do it. Plus, it looks like it's gonna. If I can't get it by tomorrow between 4 and 8 a.m., I look for that because I'm really kind of, I don't have time to be waiting around at the front door for all kinds of crap.
Literally goes back to, John, what you're saying about I can get a new life. Like I can get everything I want on Amazon now.
Yeah.
I
Thinking
mean,
with delivery, how that can go wrong,
but Carvana's done it. I mean, what's the difference really? I mean, Carvana has succeeded there, I think. I mean, I had a great experience with Carvana. I don't know.
Carvana is not sitting in my wallet or my phone.
Oh, absolutely. And they know everything you buy. They know a lot more than Carvana does, without a doubt. Yeah, curious. I love that. That's really cool. And you're right. I think that is a moment right at this moment where Amazon jumped the shark, or did they? We won't know.
And the one thing I'll add to that, almost thinking of it as an iPhone moment, I heard a little bit about this on the radio this morning. The reason it's only Hyundais right now is because there are still laws in most states that require you to go through a car dealership. Yep. So because of that, that's why they're only working. And remember, when the iPhone launched, it was only with AT&T, but it gave them time to get everything else set up. So this could have just.
So is John going to tell us that you can also buy houses on Amazon? Is that going to be what John's one is? Well, let's move on to John. Give it to me, John. What you got?
Okay. Well, this is kind of out of left field. I've been reading more and more about loneliness becoming an epidemic, right? Some of this is the working from home. Part of it is you're not going to the office. Part of it is being in this virtual world more and more for entertainment. Heck, you're not going to go down to the movie theater and see something, right? You're going to have food delivered to the house. So this is all kind of increasing that loneliness. And so I'm a big culture guy, and I wonder about then, as leaders, how are we going to start to deal with that? And if you want to have a healthy, dynamic, full potential person working for you, you better be thinking about that a little bit, about how you're going to keep that tether strong between you and your employees and connection and those things. I know we've been talking about the remote workforce, but this loneliness factor means that person who's showing up to work in your virtual workspace is impaired in a way, that full potential. It's like, well,
I was reading on it too, and it's this, they were terming it as self-isolation. Almost like an intimacy anxiety, if you will. And I thought that was very curious, because we are sort of putting that out there. I mean, it's one thing for us because we have years and years behind. Everybody on this call has been in an office somewhere and had to drive there every day. And so this is different, but it's back to this concept of, but what if that's all you knew? What if that's all you ever did? And it's like, I like to, I mean, you guys are going to laugh, but I like to take my dog down to Home Depot now and then. Not because she wants to shop, although she enjoys it, but because I want other people to pet her and I want her to be socialized with people. And I don't want her to, I just don't want a dog that ever snaps, and she's wonderfully socialized because of that. But when it's the same for people, if you're not in, you can have plenty of Zoom, but you're never going to get that water cooler moment. You're never going to have to interact with someone else on a different level. John, that is very profound. It might be the best thing we've talked about in this, other than Ann's cars, and Glenn hasn't really said anything all that profound just yet. But I think it's really important. I think it might be, because I was reading that also for ADD people, it's a really big deal, which I've been doing a lot more research into that. I thought it was very interesting, because I'm sort of in that boat. I've been lately just like, if I even like the store seems like a lot to me. Like I went to Target the other day. I was like, this is a lot. Look at all these people. I want to go home, so I can feel what you're talking about there. And I worry about myself for that, to be honest.
But I wonder, John, if we can also tie that to the fact that it seems like this is the year that we kind of did the pendulum swung back. I've seen a whole bunch of companies that have put return to the workplace kind of edicts in place, whether it's a few more days, whether it's literally 5 days a week. And in some cases, I mean, that's gotten some pretty negative pushback, but I have that same concern that you do. But you wonder, I don't know that that's the reason people are doing it, but I wonder if maybe it could be a preemptive strike to actually save on some of the things you're talking about.
I think so. I think you can look around corners. And if you want to develop young leaders, I mean, we knew this growing up, right? Remember, your leader would say, walk with me after a meeting and I'll tell you what actually happened in there.
Yeah.
You didn't see, I mean, like all that subtle.
There's none of that happens.
Thousands of examples of that. It's like, I think it's actually retarding the growth of how fast we can ramp up young leaders.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's really powerful.
So John, I understand you got one more, and to my surprise, it wasn't Bitcoin hitting 100,000.
Nope. This is although, well, we'll get to that in the next episode. But yeah, this is about probably one of the most I think one of the biggest stories of the year, which is the unfortunate thing that happened to Patelco, which has spawned a whole lot of stuff. And so for those of you that don't know, sometime around, I believe it was June or July, Patelco basically shut down all their services. They shut down everything. They reported that they had a ransomware attack. Although to this moment, as far as I know, and I've looked, I have not seen a postpartum on that from any agency. So I don't think anyone knows really totally what happened. But it caused them to take every system they had down. And my learnings from this, or my takeaway from this, was a couple things. One, we watched as sort of a new thing arose where there was this sort of ambulance chasing legal sort of thing happening on Facebook and other places where folks, because I mean, literally members did not have access to their money other than through an ATM, and that was being done through what we call stand-in. So, all of a sudden, large legal groups were approaching the Patelco members,
searching to create a class for the
create a class action.
Yeah,
which is interesting because now Melissa, who is my executive assistant or is our chief of staff, I'm not sure. She's way more than an assistant. I think we both agree to that. But she's been getting all kinds of different things on Facebook from different legal that are now approaching members for any breach that was reported. But anyway, so that was the first thing. Was there was this sort of piece of it. My understanding is they're completely back online and things are good now. But the second part of it that I think is the most important part is this rise of AI with regard to fraud. And what it's really doing is it's taking script kiddies, and if you've ever heard that term before, what script kiddie means is that's a person who's a hacker, but they're not really talented at programming or hacking. Really, what they do is they go online and they find a program and they cut and paste that program, and then they use that program written by some other hacker to try to attack some sort of victim or a site or something like that. But now with AI, script kiddies, and then what might happen is that program might not work, and then they just move along because they don't have the capability or the talent to solve the problem of whatever's broken. But now,
and they also don't have the investment in place. Just cut your losses. It's kind of like basically the fraudsters who only need like a 0.01% response rate. Who cares about all the others?
Right. But now they have the ability with AI to solve those problems. So script kiddies are now becoming much more like full-fledged hackers, and there are a lot of those folks. And then hackers are even more prolific. There was an incredible podcast, I think it was this week, on the Daily, about how the Chinese hackers have gained access to all of our communications networks, not just one, all of them. Anything that isn't encrypted going back and forth, they can see. It's basically what the government says and what they say. And the way that's happening is that, and this is going to sound very familiar to a lot of our listeners, there's a lot of legacy systems in place that are still there, but the way we've gone about sort of continuing our work is to surround them with updated systems, but that doesn't prevent the hackers once they get past those updated systems from just going wild on these legacy systems. So I'm not suggesting that's what happened at Patelco, but where I'm going is this rise of AI has really lowered the bar for entry for hackers. And if you're sitting there thinking, hey, it happened to Patelco, but maybe they just, they didn't have their eyes open, or maybe they didn't have the right product or tool or whatever, you would be sorely mistaken. Because, my opinion on Patelco, having worked, I spent a lot of time at Aaron Nyes. I know Aaron. I've talked to many folks that work there. That is a tip-top organization. And if it can happen to them, it can happen to any Canadian in the country. And when we get to our prediction episode, that's going to be one of my predictions, is there's more of this to come.
Oh boy.
And the other concern is that the water with regards to the level of it with AI and trying to guard against this, it's definitely going to be a fight fire with fire situation.
and it's going to be hard to keep up.
It's the general fraud argument all over again. It's just it's a ongoing battle to stay.
Yeah, but now but it used to be we build a 10-foot wall, they bring an 11-foot ladder. Now it's we build a 100-foot wall, and they bring 100-foot ladders. And that's a problem.
Almost a denial of service attack from that standpoint. You just can't even.
Yeah, or more of like, way more people can bring the ladder than used to be.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, I think the point on that is just that credit should be very well aware of fraud.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's that as a story from this year, it is ramping up and making sure you've got early warning systems to look out upon that. So I think that would be the
generic early warning systems, not the early warning systems that own RTP and all those places.
Right. And in the generic, in the sense of, I should make sure I'm looking at fraud and being real diligent about how I have my fraud indicators and my criteria, and how the way I am looking at it now, I need to give it a much more.
And I'll add another aspect to the story, and I'm not throwing stones here because I just know how difficult this is. But when we have these kind of issues that happen, either systems down or fraud or these kind of big events, our PR and credit unions suck. Right, like we need to get more sophisticated in how we respond to this.
Rapid response and a very kind of tailored response.
It's a science, and it's a management science that we're not executing on very well. So yeah, I just and I used to work for a company that was the king of it, right? Disney, right? They are fantastic at responding, to kind of issues, and like you just watch how it happens in that business sector versus how it's happening in ours, and it's like we got to grow up. Because it's going to happen again and again and again as we experiment more and do more, and fraud gets bigger. It's like we need to grow up,
And to that point, it's the formalization. It's saying that this scenario, the disaster recovery, putting all of those pieces and saying we have this, and this is actually a strategic skill set.
Yeah. Competency for sure.
100%.
All right, guys. Well, I think this wraps it up. I think we're at the end here, and as always, I want to close the year by saying thank you to the group that's here. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, John. And Glenn, you've always been my partner in crime for this, although maybe crime's a bad word.
Don't say crime right after that whole last.
Yeah, you're right. After that last bit. But, the other thing is I just got to thank our listeners. Glenn, I know you've been more and more getting sort of pulled aside for the podcast. I've had the same thing happen. It's been a lot of years of doing this, and I know it's a great service that we provide to people. And, but I also am so thankful to people that just actually make it happen by listening. And I'm anticipating a really strong new year with a lot of things to talk about, but also a lot of good things to happen. But I think there's plenty to if we use this year as a guideline, imagine what next year's going to look like. So just want to thank our listeners for staying with us. And if you want to find me or Glenn, you can just go to the Big-Fintech website, big-fintech.com. Glenn, where can they find you these days? Are you on X still?
I still am there, but we keep talking about doing more with Blue Sky. We haven't really kind of.
You know what? Let's make that our New Year's resolution. And for the next episode, you and I will have a Blue Sky address. And I would actually like to start a Blue Sky server for our credit union listeners. So maybe we'll do that. Yeah. But yeah, you can find us at big-fintech.com. And just thank you so much, everyone. Anything to add, Glenn?
No, I just say, find us on LinkedIn as well. We've been doing a fair bit of posting there. And happy holidays and New Year's. And we'll see you in January.
Yeah, be safe, everyone.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big Fintech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.